Hey there, how there, ho there, it's Joe Cutter Diamond. Welcome you to yet another Cutter Top 10 MLB list. And today we're going to be looking at the top 10 MLB careers cut short. It's not by death, it could also be by injury. So there have been a lot of careers that have been cut short in the worst way possible. I know that Hum Baby did his top 15 about players who died, like careers cut short due to things. But I'm not doing anything like that. One honorable mention that just missed the cut was Lyman Bostock. A lot of people said, "Who the hell is he?" Well, he was a pretty good hitter for the Minnesota Twins, and then he joined the California Angels, and was so baffled by his performance, he offered to give back his salary because he was not performing. But the Angels management said, "No, we won't let you do that." So Bostock decided to donate his salary until he got better, and he did. Bostock and the Angels were in town to face the White Sox. Bostock, after an afternoon game, went to Gary, Indiana to visit relatives, and then was shot at by somebody. But it was not a targeted attack, as Bostock was the wrong guy. The guy shot at the car, but it was a mistaken identity. Bostock passed away. It was one of the most shocking deaths around, and he was getting back in the game, if you will. So here are your top 10. Number 10 is Shoeless Joe Jackson. I know this is kind of cheating because, his stuff with the Black Sox, but come on, Shoeless Joe Jackson had a few good seasons left in him. Even though that he was starting the 1910s for Cleveland and then the White Sox, he was still pretty good. Shoeless Joe was massively illiterate, not making it past the fifth grade and all that. And a lot of people question whether he did take the money or he was forced to take the money or basically that he was just the wrong guy in the wrong place. Unfortunately, though, Shoeless Joe was part of the whole thing alongside many players like Eddie Saccott and Happy Felsch and a few other people like Chick Gandil. Buck Weaver was one of the Black Sox that actually got booted because he didn't do anything. He wasn't part of the plan to defraud gangsters and get all that money by throwing the 1919 World Series. He was caught because he had the information and refused to pass it along, despite the fact that allegedly there were murmurings that Charles Comiskey, the White Sox owner, was told about this whole thing, but he said the World Series can't be rigged. Of course, it's partially Comiskey's fault because he was basically cheapening the team and all that, making them to pay for their own laundry bills and all that stuff. And, that's why we call the Black Sox. But yeah, Shoeless Joe Jackson was one of those guys who lost it. It was his own fault. You can't gamble in baseball. Number 9 is Addie Joss. Addie Joss was a great player for the Cleveland Indians. Yes, I'm saying Indians because that's what they're called. In the 1900s, he was a star pitcher in the dead ball era. The era that's a lot of 1-0 games instead of like 9 games that we see now. He had a career ERA under 2 and a perfect game, mind you, in 1904, which was the last perfect game in the American League for 18 years? But, yeah, but Addie Joss was big. In 1908, he lost the key match against Ed Walsh and the White Sox for the trip to the World Series on the final day. But yeah, Addie Joss was big. He was 31 years old. He was making things happen. I think he was part native. Anyway, his quality was good. His longevity would be limited, and he would die of tuberculosis at age 31. So anyhow, that was brutal. I mean, at 31 years old, and tuberculosis was massive throughout the 1910s and the 1920s. I think 1930s they fixed it, but yeah, Addie Joss was just in the wrong place, wrong time. Another famous death that actually missed the cut was Jose Fernandez. In 2016, he was star of the Marlins. He looked pretty good. He could even rake as in hit. But unfortunately, he and 2 friends lost their lives in a boat crash on an off day. And unfortunately, he died. And the Marlins had to postpone their game that Sunday against, I think it was the Braves. Yeah. And then against the Mets on the Monday. The next day, they chose to play the game, and Dee Gordon hit that walk-off home, that first game home run. So that was huge, how a young prospect like Jose Fernandez could die in such a tragic sense of the word. I mean, it was just horrible and all that. And I remember when I heard about that death, that was 2016. I nearly dropped my bowl of cereal. Anyway, number 8 is Jared Richard. This is not a death that changed everything. This was just bad luck. Jared Richard was a flamethrower. He was the Houston Star flamethrower before one Nolan Ryan came in 1980 in the free agency. So Jared Richard was the star of Houston's pitching. Don Wilson was, but he died in a carbon monoxide accident that he accidentally poisoned himself. Some say it was a suicide, but it wasn't. But yeah, Jared Richard was doing well. Over 300 strikeouts in 1979. He was excellent and all that. With Nolan Ryan coming to town, the Astros thought they were going to take over the National League with their prowess. They were decent in 1980 up to the All-Star break. And then after the All-Star break, Jared Richard doing bullpen sessions was getting a little dizzy and all that. He had fatigue. Something was wrong. He was still throwing a lot of strikeouts. But then, unfortunately, he had his right side hurt, paralyzed by a stroke. So Jared Richard had a massive stroke. He was 10-3, if I remember correctly, in that 1980 season before he had that stroke. It would affect a lot of things. He would have to spend time getting back into focus. He couldn't be the same pitcher he was. He tried his best, but failed. Jared Richard, a lot of people said the Astros would have been in the World Series in 1980 instead of the Phillies if it weren't for Jared Richard's stroke. I mean, Jared Richard definitely would have been the last gasp for Philly to take out Philly and go to the World Series when they were in the National League. Unfortunately, though, the Astros would fall flat. 1981, they did get to the NLDS against the Dodgers, but faltered. 1986, they got to the LCS, but lost Game 6 to the Mets. So, yeah, Jared Richard could have brought the Astros some happiness. It took till 2004 to win a playoff series, and then, Jared Richard was actually living under a bridge, but thankfully was saved and became a minister. Number 7 is Ray Chapman. You kind of had to figure that Ray Chapman had to be that guy. Yeah, it was Ray Chapman, all right. Major League Baseball only has one death during a game by a player. There have been fans who died during games and all that, but still, like, the only player to die was Ray Chapman in 1920. He was pretty good. He was a star shortstop for the Cleveland Indians. They were playing in the Polo Grounds because the Yankees and Giants shared the Polo Grounds, New York Giants, New York Yankees. So anyway, Ray Chapman was a pretty good player and all that. So the 1920 Tribe were trying to get rid of the White Sox and win the AL pennant. Back when you had to win the American League and National League outright to win Triple World Series. So he was up at bat against Carl Mays, who was a submarine pitcher for the Yankees at the time, and Mays struck him on the head. It was such force that Chapman didn't run the first base run away, and Carl Mays thought that the ball went off of him, so it was a hit, so he flew at the first, but didn't know it hit Chapman in the head. Unfortunately, the ball was super, super dirty because of the spitball, tobacco juice, and whatever could be on the ball. And Chapman didn't really see it. Chapman was in hospital. 12 hours later, he would die, and this would be massive. They changed the rules. You could not throw a spitball unless you are a proven spitballer, like Berlin Grimes, for example, because he got grandfathered in. In 1934, he finally retired. But the second a ball was super scuffed and all that, it was taken out of the game. Baseball practices were there, and no one wore a helmet till the 1940s, if you will, with Pete Reiser. The career was ascending. However, it's low on this list because of a few things. Number one, the 1920 Indians did win the World Series, so despite Ray Chapman's death, it brought Cleveland closer together. The team closer together. And Chapman's replacement at shortstop is a legendary Hall of Famer himself by the name of Joe Sewell, Sewell, who actually was one of the most hard to strike out players ever. Think of Tony Gwynn in the 1930s. That was Joe Sewell. So that was what happened. Number 6 is Tony Congliaro. Fuck, I cannot pronounce. Congliaro. Conigliaro. So anyway, Tony's time was big. He was a hometown boy from Massachusetts. At 19, he got to play with the Red Sox, and he was pretty good. At age 22, he had 100 career home runs, one of the youngest to ever get that mark. Eat your heart up, Bryce Harper and Ken Griffey Jr. But yeah, Tony C was amazing, and Boston looked good. 1967, in the impossible dream season, which Boston was given massive odds to even make it to the top four in the AL, they pulled everything off. Karol Yastrzemski had a month for the ages in September, practically putting the team on his back in that big 14, battle for the 1967 AL title to go to the World Series. Unfortunately, on August 18th, 1967, Tony C would face Jack Hamilton of the Angels. Hamilton threw a fastball very much inside and crushed Tony C in the cheek. I don't know if I'm putting it to the right cheek, but it hit the cheek, and then his eye was severely damaged. The image of him after the beanball is one of the most sickening things, and I can't look at that. I just can't. Anyway, this beating was horrible. Tony C was basically a middle of the order guy who was protecting Karol Yastrzemski and all that. Sadly, though, he would be hurt, and he didn't play the rest of 1967. Obviously, I mean, that injury was hard to do. I mean, I think even 60 years later, it would be a hard injury to come back from. But yeah, Bull Sox did win the AL, surviving the Twins, Tigers, and White Sox to do so. And they did go to the World Series and lose Game 7 to the Cardinals, but still. Tony C would come back in 1969, and he actually hit home runs like there's no tomorrow. But in 1970, he suffered, I think, a stroke. Well, he had double vision almost every day after the beanball from Hamilton. So practically, he was doomed. He would die in 1992 of a heart attack, I think, if I remember correctly. But yeah, that was brutal for Boston. Number 5 is Bo Jackson. Bo Jackson's career was interrupted by his hip injury, but it was more of a football player than a baseball player. Jackson did baseball kind of as a hobby. Bo Jackson was a great player for Auburn's baseball team alongside Frank Thomas, if I remember correctly. But Bo Jackson and his visit with Tampa and all that ruined his eligibility for college baseball. And he was upset with Tampa and refused to play for Tampa, even though he was picked number 1 overall by the Bucks, because they cost him his college baseball career. So Jackson sat out. He didn't want to play for Tampa. He went back into the draft. Tampa didn't even trade him to another team, which would have worked out, get some players in the process. But he went back in the draft, and Oakland drafted him late. And the Raiders paired him up with Marcus Allen, and it worked out. Bo Jackson was a great football player. And unfortunately, 91 against the Bengals, he injured himself. The Bengals won that game in Los Angeles at the Coliseum. But what's even more impressive was that 91 victory was the last time in 3 decades that the Bengals would win a playoff game. Nevertheless, Bo Jackson did have a good baseball career with the Royals and all that. He famously made some key plays at Yankee Stadium. He even threw out Harold Reynolds on what seemingly was not a perfect ball to left field, well, at the Kingdom in 1989. And remember, he was the guy who led off the All-Star game in Anaheim Stadium with a home run off of Rick Russell, and Vin Scully on the call says, Bo says hello. His real athleticism made his baseball prime feel enormous. However, Jackson's baseball career was not ended by that hip injury. He came back, and in 93, he had a famous home run with his artificial hip against the New York Yankees, White Sox opening day 1993. And he helped the 93 White Sox get to the ALCS, but fell to my Blue Jays. But yeah, Bo Jackson would have been a lot better. Number 4 is Furman Munson. Furman Munson is a legend in his own right. The day I'm taping this is a week and 47 years? Yeah, 47 years in a week after that tragic crash. So anyway, Munson was the Yankees captain. You know, hockey had their captains, football their captains, basketball their captains, but Munson was the Yankees captain. A 7-time All-Star, the AL MVP in 1976, and a central figure on many championship clubs. Munson was the star in the 70s. The Yankees needed a catcher to get rid of Yogi Berra's legacy, and he looked up. 1977, 1978, he won back-to-back World Series, which was great. He was the captain, AL MVP. He was good. after a game. I can't remember who it was. I was going to say the White Sox, but probably not. During an off day, Furman Munson flew back to Canton, Ohio, or was it Dayton? He flew back to Ohio where he would take flying lessons, and he had two other people in his plane with him. Unfortunately, Munson made a few brutal mistakes with his personal plane, and it crashed, and he died at age 32, which was shocking and all of that. Munson actually had meaningful seasons left and a stronger Hall of Fame case ahead. I mean, he got to the Hall of Fame, thank goodness for that. But still, Furman Munson and the Yankees just fell flat. I mean, the Yankees did win that Monday Night Baseball game the day of the funeral, in which Bobby Mercer gave a massive eulogy, and Howard Cosell said that too. Bobby Mercer would be the hero in that game against Baltimore 5-4. But yeah, what might have been if the Yankees had a good catcher and all that, would they have swiped Rick Cerone from the Toronto Blue Jays after the 79 season? Probably still, but anyway, anything can happen. Number 3 is Roy Campanella. Roy Campanella was an icon for catching and hitting for the Brooklyn Dodgers. So anyhow, Campy was the catcher that broke the color barrier. One of the first to hit the color barrier and break it was Roy Campanella. He did better than Jackie Robinson. He won 3 NL MVP awards. He was on the Brooklyn team that won the 1955 World Series. It was looking pretty good. I mean, Campanella's major league resume was actually shortened because of segregation, and of course, MLB being dickwads. But it was still Hall of Fame caliber. And unfortunately, in 1958, after leaving his bar, he got in a massive accident, and the automobile accident left his spine twisted. Fortunately for Campanella, he was still alive, but he wouldn't walk again. In 1959, there was an exhibition. No, sorry, that was January 1958. Before he became a LA Dodger, before the Dodgers could play a game in LA, Campanella was in that accident. And then a few months later, when the Yankees played the Dodgers in a exhibition game at LA Coliseum, they did it at night. They turned off the lights, and then everyone lit a candle to show Roy Campanella that people were hoping for him, hoping and praying for him. So yeah, his career was basically ruined because of that. But he got to the Hall of Fame. He got never retired. So I mean, he got something. He would die, I think, in 1993, if I remember correctly. But yeah, that's big. Number 2 is Lou Gehrig. I know you probably think Lou Gehrig should be number 1, but technically no. There wasn't number 1. Anyway, Lou Gehrig was an inner circle legend when he was forced out of the lineup in 1939. Gehrig was his first baseman from the University of Columbia and then took over from Wally Pipp in 1925 and never gave up first base. For 13 plus years, he was the constant at first base. He was the man part of the murderer's row with Babe Ruth, Earl Coombs, and Tony Lazzeri. The fact of the matter is that Gehrig was great. He put up 493 home runs, a 340 batting average, one of the best Ironman streaks of all time, the longest, with over 2,100 straight games. To put that bluntly, if you play every game every day for 10 years, you would only have 1,600. We all know about the Ripken streak, but the Gehrig streak, that's even harder, in a sense. He was a good run producer, but early in 1939, the first month, he batted terribly and decided on May 2nd, 1939, to take himself out of the lineup, and was assured that his spot would be back in when he got better. Unfortunately, he never did. He went to the Mayo Clinic, and they called it ALS, or what's now known as Lou Gehrig disease. Gehrig, unfortunately, in 1941, would die of his illness, and it was just terrible and all that. The Yankees still won a few World Series without him, but it was never the same. I mean, Lou Gehrig was just the Iron Horse for a reason. And number 1 is Sandy Koufax. Sandy Koufax is the best pitcher around. Now, of course, everyone would know that if Koufax had been pitching in the era of Tommy John surgery or the surgeries that ball players go through in the 2020s, Koufax probably would have lasted 10 more years. Who knows? Koufax was only 30 when he had to retire because of his chronic arm trouble. Koufax was at its peak in the 1960s. People forget that Koufax actually was kind of a middle tier reliever slash starter in the late 1950s. He was walking people too many times. He struck out people, but he walked people alarming late. Norm Sherry, becoming pitch coach of the LA Dodgers, had to give Koufax some pointers and all that, and Koufax did. Koufax had that devastating fastball, and from 1961 to 1966, he put up 3 Cy Youngs. Back when the Cy Young actually was the best pitcher, period, out of everybody. No American League, National League MVP, Cy Young. There was a Cy Young, one per league and all that. He won an MVP. He pitched 4 no-hitters, including a perfect game against the Cubs in 1965, and won 4 World Series titles. The guy was iconic, although my stats have to be wrong with the 4 World Series titles, because I know he was there in 1959 when they won it. And then it was 1963 when he had that 15 strikeout performance in Game 1 against the Yankees. And then in 1966, he was good, but unfortunately the Dodgers were blown out by the Baltimore Orioles in their bullpen for some strange reason. Koufax was a hero in a sense. He was very good. Unfortunately, though, his elbow would be terrible and creaky, and he had no feeling in it. That was just terrible. The chronic arm trouble really robbed his career. And as I said, if this was in today's modern medicine, he would have lasted till the mid 70s, for sure. Don Drysdale lasted only a few more years after that and then became a broadcaster for the Expos in 1970. But still, I mean, Koufax's career could have been much better if it weren't for the chronic arm trouble. Anyhow, I'm Jeff Diamond at Duke.